Every great conversation begins between two thoughts.
Can I ask you something without you turning it into a whole psychology lecture?
I make no promises.
Why? Is it so hard to quit things you know are bad for you? And I mean genuinely know. Not vaguely aware, fully consciously know this is not good for me. And still keep doing it.
What's the thing?
It doesn't matter what the thing is. Pick one. Everyone has one. The late night scrolling, the sugar, the checking the phone first thing in the morning despite knowing it ruins the start of the day. The thing you've decided to stop approximately 47 times.
And stopped successfully for about 4 days each time.
3, if I'm being honest. And then something happens. I'm tired or stressed or just Tuesday. And the thing is just there. And I'm doing it before I even consciously decided to.
Before you decided, that's the key phrase. Because that's exactly what's happening. The habit is running before the decision-making part of your brain even arrives at the conversation.
How is that possible? I have a brain. It's supposed to be in charge.
It is in charge most of the time. But habits are stored and operated by a different part of the brain than the one you think of as you. The conscious, rational thinking you lives primarily in the prefrontal cortex. But habits, deeply repeated behaviors, live in the basal ganglia, a much older, much more automatic structure. And when a habit cue appears, the basal ganglia fires the sequence before the prefrontal cortex has even processed what's happening.
So the habit starts running, and by the time I consciously notice, it's already mid-sequence.
Often already complete. Approximately 40% of the things we do aren't based on decisions. Instead, they're habits. Nearly half of daily behavior, automatic, not chosen, just run. By a system that was built to be efficient, to save the thinking brain for things that actually require thinking.
Which is brilliant for helpful habits, and not so brilliant for the ones that aren't.
The system doesn't distinguish. It doesn't evaluate whether a habit is good for you. It just runs what was repeated most frequently in response to a particular cue. The basal ganglia is extraordinarily good at its job. The problem is, its job is efficiency, not wisdom.
So how does a bad habit get built in the first place? Because nobody decides, I'm going to develop this unhelpful pattern and run it for years.
No. But they do, usually without realizing, stumble into a loop that the brain finds rewarding enough to repeat. And repeat. Until the loop becomes automatic. Researchers call it the habit loop. And it has 3 parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward.
Walk me through it with something real.
Take the late night scrolling. The cue might be getting into bed, that physical context. The familiar environment of lying down in the dark. The routine, picking up the phone and scrolling. And the reward, not pleasure exactly, but reduction of something. Boredom, loneliness. The slightly unsettled feeling of a day that didn't quite go as hoped. The scroll numbs the edge of that feeling. Just enough. Just temporarily. But the brain registers cue-triggered routine, discomfort reduced, this loop works. File it. Repeat it.
So the habit wasn't built because the scrolling felt amazing. It was built because it took something uncomfortable away.
Almost always. Neuroscientist and psychiatrist Judson Brewer at Brown University's Mindfulness Center has spent years studying this exact mechanism. And what he found is that habits, including addictive ones, are almost always built on the same foundation. The brain learning that a particular behavior reliably reduces discomfort or produces a felt sense of reward. Not necessarily a big reward, just enough. Enough to make the loop worth repeating.
Which means the habit is not the problem. The habit is the brain's solution to a problem, the discomfort it was trying to manage.
That reframe, from the habit is my failing to the habit is my brain's attempt to cope, changes everything about how to approach breaking it. Because if you try to remove a coping mechanism without addressing what it was coping with, the brain will find another one, often worse.
Which is why people who quit smoking sometimes start eating more, or people who stop one numbing behavior often pick up another.
The underlying need didn't disappear, just the behavior that was meeting it. And the brain, still facing that need, goes looking for the next available solution. Which is why cold turkey, pure willpower, white-knuckle resistance has such a poor long-term success rate. About 70% of smokers say they want to quit, yet fewer than 1 in 10 succeed each year. Not because they lack willpower, but because willpower is trying to fight a neural pathway that was built specifically to run without willpower.
You can't outthink the basal ganglia, because it fires before thinking arrives.
And it fires in response to cues, which is the next crucial piece. Breaking habits is promoted by weakening of stimulus-response links, avoidance of habit stimuli, goal-directed inhibition, and formation of competing stimulus-response associations. Which in plain language means, the most effective way to interrupt a habit is to interrupt the cue before the routine begins. Not to resist the routine once it's already running.
Change the environment before the cue fires, not fight the habit after it's already started.
Which connects directly to what we discussed about environment design. The person who doesn't want to scroll at night and leaves the phone in another room never encounters the cue in the same form. The habit loop never starts. No cue, no routine, no reward. And without repetition, the neural pathway that runs the habit begins to weaken.
It weakens through disuse.
Habits are actions triggered by cues, such as a time of day, an activity, or a location. And they culminate in a feel-good reward that, through repetition, firmly links the cue and the reward in the brain. Sever that link consistently, interrupt the loop enough times, and the automatic firing weakens. Not immediately, not completely, but measurably. The pathway doesn't disappear, but it becomes less dominant, less automatic. There is more gap between cue and routine, and in that gap, choice lives.
So the goal isn't to destroy the habit, it's to create enough gap between cue and routine that the thinking brain can arrive before the automatic behavior completes.
Exactly. And there's a second approach, equally important, that addresses the reward side of the loop rather than the cue side. And this is where Judson Brewer's work becomes extraordinary. He found that one of the most powerful ways to break a habit is not to resist the behavior, but to do it with complete mindful attention. To really, fully, consciously experience it, without distraction, without numbing, without the automatic quality that makes it feel okay.
Why does that help?
Because habits persist, partly because we do them automatically. We scroll, but we're not really experiencing the scrolling. We eat the sugar, but we're not really tasting it. We're somewhere else. And that automatic quality protects the habit from evaluation. The brain never really assesses, is this actually rewarding me? It just runs the loop. But when you bring full conscious attention to the habit, when you actually notice every sensation, every feeling, every moment of what's happening, the brain gets accurate information about the actual reward value of the behavior.
And often, the actual experience is not that good.
Often significantly less good than the anticipation. The scroll feels like it should feel good, but 30 minutes in, consciously experienced it usually feels vaguely empty, slightly worse than before. The sugar tastes amazing for 10 seconds. Consciously experienced, the next 20 minutes often feels sluggish and slightly guilty. And the brain, getting this accurate feedback, begins to update its reward assessment. When we become disenchanted with unhelpful behaviors, our brain leaves this space, saying, "Give me something else."
The habit loses its grip not because you fought it, but because you actually experienced it fully and found it wanting.
The brain stops valuing what it can clearly see isn't delivering what it promised. And the third approach, and this one connects to what we talked about in the identity episode, is replacing the identity story. Not just the behavior.
Because again, if you see yourself as someone who has this bad habit, even trying to quit it, the identity keeps pulling the behavior back.
Since habits take practice and repetition to form, the same is true when it comes to breaking them, says Elliot Berkman, director of the University of Oregon's Social and Affective Neuroscience Lab. And the research consistently shows that identity-based approaches outperform purely behavioral ones for long-term habit change. Not, I'm trying to quit this, but I am someone who no longer needs this, who has found better ways to meet the need this was serving.
Which requires knowing what need it was serving in the first place.
Always. And that question, what was this habit actually doing for me, is uncomfortable. Because the honest answer is rarely flattering. It was numbing something, avoiding something, soothing something, managing something I didn't want to face directly. And facing that, really facing it, is harder than just trying to stop the behavior. But it is the only approach that addresses the root rather than the branch.
You can cut the branch, but if the root is still there, the branch grows back.
Always grows back. And the fourth thing, and this one surprises most people, is that context change is one of the most powerful habit-breaking tools available. A more successful approach to habit change involves behavioral interventions, and research published in Current Directions in Psychological Science evaluating the latest research found that many habit change interventions fail because they try to modify beliefs without changing context. Because habits are deeply tied to environmental context, the same cue, in the same place at the same time, reliably fires the same routine. But a new environment, a new context, breaks the automatic link. The cue doesn't appear in its usual form. The basal ganglia doesn't fire the familiar sequence, and in that disruption, new choices become possible.
Which is why people often successfully change habits during big life transitions. Moving to a new city, starting a new job, having a major life change.
The context shifts. The old cues don't appear in their usual form. The automatic loops don't fire automatically anymore. And the person, briefly in new territory, has more genuine choice about what loops to build next. Research actually confirms this. People are significantly more likely to successfully change habits during periods of major life transition than during stable periods. Not because their willpower is stronger, because the environmental cues that trigger the old habits are temporarily absent.
So if you can't have a major life transition, you manufacture a smaller version. Change something meaningful about the environment, the context, the cues.
Even small context changes matter. Sitting in a different chair, working in a different room, taking a different route, changing the order of the morning. Anything that disrupts the automatic environmental flow that usually delivers the habit cue before you've had time to think.
I came into this conversation thinking, why can't I just have more discipline? Why can't I just stop? And what I'm hearing is, discipline was never the right tool. The right tools are, understand the need the habit serves, interrupt the cue before the loop starts, pay full conscious attention to the actual experience, change the identity story, and shift the context.
5 tools, none of which require extraordinary willpower, all of which work with the brain's actual architecture rather than against it. Because that, ultimately, is what separates the approaches that work from the ones that don't. The ones that work understand that a habit is not a moral failure. It is a neural pathway, built through repetition, maintained by cues and rewards, and changed not through fighting it, but through understanding it deeply enough to offer the brain something better.
Something that actually meets the need, rather than something that fights the symptom.
And here is what I think is the most important thing to hold on to from this conversation. A 2024 meta-analysis found that it's a myth that most people can form a habit in just 21 days. Research shows it typically takes 2 to 5 months to develop health-related habits, and it can take some people only 4 days, while others may take as long as 335 days. Which means the timeline for breaking a habit is also not 21 days. It is not a fixed number. It is personal, unpredictable. And the people who succeed long-term are not the ones who expected it to be quick. They are the ones who kept going past the point where it felt like it was working.
The habit doesn't break the day you decide to stop. It breaks somewhere in the long stretch of days after.
Quietly, gradually, without announcement, until one day you notice the cue appeared and the routine didn't. And you realize, somewhere back there, something changed. Not because you fought harder, but because you understood better and kept going anyway.
Whatever your thing is, the one you've stopped and restarted and stopped again, it is not evidence that you are weak. It is evidence that your brain built a pathway to meet a need. And pathways built over years don't change in days, but they do change with the right understanding, with the right approach, and with a little more patience for yourself than willpower ever allowed.
Ask yourself honestly, what is this habit actually doing for me? Not what is it costing me, what is it giving me? What discomfort does it reduce? What need does it meet? Because the answer to that question is the beginning of the real work. And the real work, unlike willpower, actually lasts.
The habit was never the enemy. It was a solution that stopped working. Find a better one.
And be patient with the brain that's still learning which one that is.
Thank you for being here with us today.
If this changed how you think about the thing you've been trying to quit, share it with someone who has been blaming themselves for a pattern they never fully understood.
And our question before you go.
What do you think your most persistent bad habit is actually doing for you? What need is it meeting, even imperfectly?
Tell us in the comments. Honestly, this is a safe space. We read every single one, always.
Until next time.
Stay curious, stay kind, and today, be just a little more patient with the brain that's still figuring it out.